All righty. Welcome everyone. I'm Becky Sedillis. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Poverty Solution, and I am so grateful to welcome you to this important discussion on poverty alleviation. As the COO, I help ensure that our work stays focused, effective, and truly makes a difference in our communities. Now, we have an insightful session ahead. You'll hear from dedicated leaders in Tennessee who are working hands-on to reduce poverty where they live. Through a series of recorded conversations, they will share practical strategies, key lessons, and approaches that are working, as well as what needs to happen next. So to lead us through this webinar, I'm pleased to introduce our founder, Scott Miller. Now, with decades of experience in poverty alleviation, Scott has been deeply involved in developing programs across the country that help move people out of poverty. Today, he'll guide us through a new framework to better understand our collective work and lead the interviews you're going to hear. Now, after the webinar, we will be sharing the slides along with an exclusive download featuring the key speakers. So if you've registered, you'll receive an email with these attachments. If you haven't registered and you would like to get these, drop your email in the comments or send us an email at info@thepovertysolution.com. So thank you so much for being here. And Scott, let's get this webinar started.
Thank you, Becky. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Just a brief background of my work. I started in this field many years ago. It was a graduate. I was in college, and during my spring breaks, I was volunteering in a homeless shelter, and that opened my eyes to being raised in the suburbs. I just didn't have an experience with poverty, and I didn't understand it. But that experience informed me and actually put me on a mission. I started working with designing programs based on best practices way back in the early 80s, actually, to support families completely out of poverty and to have that insight be given to policymakers so that we could begin to change the way we think about what we're doing with poverty, the conditions of poverty in this country. My firm belief then, and still is now, is that we can and we should end poverty. And what's exciting to me about what we're doing right now is that lots of people are talking this way more than ever. I've been around many blocks for many years to many communities. And I can tell you that the conversation has become more sophisticated, more robust, more interesting, more hopeful. And I believe that we're on a track now as a country to begin understanding what it would really take to not only support people completely out of poverty, which is still a novel idea in our world, but to reduce poverty rates, to have the proof be in the pudding that people have more money than they have expenses, and they can set aside something for the future. So without any further ado, let me get to what we think is a basic universal model that is being deployed all across the country right now. Let's go to this first slide, Becky. So this is, at the risk of being overly simplistic about a very complex system, what we see is that in almost every community trying to support people who are in poverty to be able to get to economic stability, there's some version of an economic stability team. There's some set of programs that are working directly with families. To the extent that they are focused on earned income being more than expenses is here and there. You're seeing more of that, but an economic stability team, in our definition, is any group that's working directly with households, individuals, and families to improve their income and even perhaps reduce some of their basic expenses so that they're not struggling so much with the issues of poverty. This, on our best days, the information coming up from this work is going into a collective impact team, which is a now common understanding of a really collaborative planning group that's able to analyze data, understand what are the service gaps and the system barriers that are influencing success at the economic stability team level. And ideally, that group's able to look at the leadership in all sectors. All sectors benefit from reducing poverty rates: business, government, human services, philanthropy, civic, faith, education. All of them have a certain set of rotten outcomes that are coming out of poverty problems in the community, and all of them benefit by having this come down. So to be able to identify leadership's leadership teams and champions in each of these sectors becomes a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. How do we begin to align the funding of this work and the funding of a lot of other kind of work into reducing poverty rates? This, to me, is the nature of a poverty alleviation system. It's something that is intentionally trying to reduce the poverty rate and trying to support people completely out of poverty. Let's take a look at this a little more carefully. Next slide. So in a poverty alleviation system, one might start looking, just again, very simplistically, at does the community's poverty rate come down if we take a geographical target area like a zip code or a county or a city or a state or a region of states? Is there some way to notice the poverty rate coming down? It's a very complex issue because it's being influenced by lots of forces from all the sectors. But if all the sectors are at the table looking at this, it's likely that we can begin to work together in a whole new way, especially once we understand new financing models, to be able to get these poverty rates to come down over the next decade. And people need to reach economic stability based on their own individualized household budgets. Ultimately, that's where the rubber hits the road. Do I have more income than expense for basic needs? Do I have the ability to put some more into savings to manage something that will happen in the future or for things I want in the future? That's ultimately what we're trying to do, is increase the capacity of this country to be able to have our citizens with this kind of an experience. So next slide. We're talking about how it is right now, though. And so the best examples of these new success metrics are, for example, the ALICE self-sufficiency rates that United Way is promoting, or setting up a goal, for example, of 225% of the federal poverty level as an out of poverty marker, or just looking at self-sufficiency markers that are known to influence people's well-being and being able to predict that they're moving towards economic stability. So there's lots of new systems out there for measuring results. And all of this is better than not doing this. Next. This is a fairly dramatic slide, but it does show that right now, the way we've organized things is pretty allopathic, and it doesn't necessarily produce reliable long-term results. There are so many different players providing so many pieces of the puzzle that what we often find is the unintended consequence of all this is that families, households that are trying to become more economically stable are just bombarded with an incredible maze of programs, requirements, meetings, eligibility, forms to fill out, that a lot of their energy and attention, which should be directed towards being able to get into the workforce and stabilize their situation, is being spent managing the poverty management system's offerings. This system, as we see it right now, is not accountable to reducing poverty rates, and it's not accountable to supporting people completely out of poverty. There are a lot of good things happening, but they're not being pulled together in a way that shows any change in the poverty rate or any changes in actually people's individual experiences over the long haul. So we have a very low economic mobility rate from the bottom quintile of income to the top. It's about 7.3% nationwide. So let's take a look at this next slide and just see how we've been doing over the years. It's been the same. Poverty has stayed pretty much the same. There's a good argument that it's actually worse now because the poverty rate was built off of an old formula back in the 60s, using the cost of food as a determinant of what people are in or out of poverty levels. And so the cost of food has not grown as fast as the cost of housing and healthcare, for example, childcare. So to be in poverty can now be closer to 30% of our households across the country struggling to meet basic needs. So let's talk about what the new pathway, the work that we're going to describe in Tennessee today, it is really a comprehensive workforce pathway. It's supporting people from public assistance into the workforce. What's powerful about doing a pilot like this is that it will kick up everything that is not happening systemically to support this process. in other words, the service gaps and the system barriers are become crystal clear as we commit to a group of several hundred families going through these stages. Most of the money we're spending right now, and it's estimated about over $1 trillion in the anti-poverty work just from the feds, that money is looping often between crisis intervention and the stabilization stage. People are in crisis, they get stabilized for a while, but then they get back into crisis and it just loops and loops. The handoff to workforce readiness is typically, and I've been in close to all this in hundreds of communities, that's typically weak. It's not an intentional, well-coordinated handoff. In some cases it is, but in most places it's not. And so the next three stages are done by another group of people under a different set of funding requirements. And the readiness, placement, and advancement stages are critical so people don't go back into crisis and then require restabilization. If we do this right, it will strengthen our economy. It will strengthen businesses' ability to have qualified workers fill jobs that right now they can't fill. So let's just describe our relationship. I am the founder of Circles USA. So I did that for a couple of decades and launched programs that were designed to support people completely out of poverty, with one of our fortes being the bill out of social capital. Linking, meaning we had names of people that we were sending people for referrals. We had those kind of relationships warmed up so that there was more compliance to the referrals we were making. We had bonding social capital, which means that we were putting together peer groups that were working with each other to support themselves once a week in making and working their plans. And we had bridging social capital, which is the relationship with middle and upper income volunteers who learned how to walk alongside of people. We got really good at that. And there are chapters all over the country that are flourishing at this level of being able to prove to communities what really is required, especially around the use of social capital to support people in making more earned income. A couple of years ago, I turned the management of this over to others and started a new group, which is called the Poverty Solution. And we got into a relationship with the Upper Cumberland Human Resource Agency, based in Cookeville, Tennessee. It serves a 14-county region, and there were opportunities through TANF in Tennessee to create pilot programs that would begin to show a different way of building these pathways from public assistance to jobs. We helped them win a planning grant, helped facilitate that process, and then we worked with them to design one of the 7 awards that were made at this 4-year actually level, $25 million projects. And they have now brought in 700 families into this journey out of poverty. So that's the snapshot of the pilot we're working with right now, trying to learn how to be much more comprehensive, long-term, and sophisticated about what people really need. This is the demographic of the group that we're working with right now. The average age is 32, 92% of the participants are female, 28% of them are married or living with a partner. So the majority of them are single moms. They have on average 2 children. They're 92% white, and 5% have had a disability. Educationally, 90% have had at least a high school diploma or a GED, and 67% are employed. So, I mean, it's important to realize that people on public assistance in this sample, the majority of them are already employed, and they're already making on average about $16 an hour. Next slide. The early results snapshot, these are just hot off the press, but we've got 53 families completely out of poverty, 83 children are out of poverty, 144 of these families. This is a random control study. So in the full service group that this Empower program, as it's known, is affecting, over 50% now, have 144 families have increased their federal poverty level status by 50% or more. So we're making progress, pulling everybody in the right direction. This is a collaboration of many partners who are in workforce, pre-kindergarten prep. They're involved with medical assistance, healthcare, brokering, you name it, all the different parts and pieces that need to be in this process are represented by this powerful group of partners that we've been able to work with. This first group of families who exited already had an increase of 38% in their earned income from 19,000 to 27,000. What's interesting to note is the next slide. The ones that have stayed enrolled are already making more progress in that, and their increase has moved to 45%. I think one of the things we learn in circles is that everything seems to happen in relationships. So the more relationships and the more social capital you can bring to bear on these pathways, the better, because it allows for being able to stay with people for a longer period of time. If it's just purely transactional relationships, in other words, paid professionals to work, case manage, do that, that's useful. But if that's it, our experience is that it doesn't allow us to stay involved over the 3, 4, 5 years it may take for a family to completely move to economic stability. And so in this project in Upper Cumberland, there are a number of circle projects that have been launched to help make this social capital feature strong in our projects. Next. So we're about to hear a video we did with Megan Spurgeon, who's the director of Empower at Upper Cumberland, and Mark Farley, who's the executive director of the Upper Cumberland Development District. What's really unique about their organization, and I could go on and on about this, but we got other things to get to, but they do both human services and economic development under the same organizational structure. And they have many of the local leaders on their board of directors. So their access to both the top of organizations as well as their connection to people that they're working with directly is really strong. And it allowed them, I think, to be an excellent pilot choice, because they have the capacity to do this work, be able to measure the results, be able to make changes across a lot of different collaborative relationships. So let's just listen to what they have to say about the cultural change that happened when they moved their attention towards the beginning of poverty alleviation rather than just poverty management. Again, we're talking about the relationship with economic stability teams, et cetera. Okay.
Sorry. Do you want me to go ahead with the video?
Yeah, no, go ahead with the video. Yeah, hard to screw that up.
Technical glitch. Sorry, everyone.
First time doing this. Hundreds of families out of poverty and into the workforce. So what has been, in your observation, one of the biggest set of changes in the organization? Let's start there first.
Probably our way of thinking. You know, we are a traditional community action agency, and for years we have administered government programs where we've handed people money thinking we were helping them and trying to get them out of poverty. But in reality, all we were doing is just helping manage their poverty. And one of the great things when we were introduced to you is understanding that that wasn't solving their long-term issues, and that we had to change our way of thinking. Starting this in and around COVID, when you have a lot of extra federal funding coming down, had really enticed a lot of our families to stay on the sidelines, stay at home. They were receiving a lot of benefits, and I'm gonna tell you, we had to address that. And I feel like through this project, through meeting you, we were able to change our mind shift and realize that we needed to help families alleviate their poverty rather than just manage their poverty.
Thanks, Mark. Megan, what have you seen with families themselves? What has changed in the way that they think or approach life based on the work that you're doing with Empower?
I think that families' lives have definitely been impacted and changed, but I think that a lot of it is the approach that we're taking with families. It's different than our typical, service delivery, as Mr. Farley had stated, that, we're not just handing them a service, a one-time service, a one and done, see you next year kind of thing. It's that relationship building that's happening between the navigators, the staff that are working and doing the case management with families and those families. So it's kind of just a more unique model. So that alone has had a great impact, having regular meetings, set requirements, setting goals, celebrating the goals when they're accomplished, or if they don't get accomplished, setting up new plans to help them meet those goals. So it's just a different model, and having the collaboration that we have built with the different partners allows us to meet varying different needs that they have. And it's really just been a much more streamlined and efficient process.
So what did you, same with you, Megan, for a minute, what have been the changes you're leading this project, you've got several employees working that you're supervising, and they have to change their ways, right? And most of the people that we get hired into a project like this have been trained in what we call this poverty management system. And so to move into this poverty alleviation headset is a different game altogether, because you have to put all these pieces together to really get the results they're looking for, which is long-term out of poverty sustainability. So how's that been?
Yeah, it's definitely, we have brought on all together through this pilot initiative with the TANF Opportunity Act. We have added about a capacity of about 50 additional staff across the region through all of our partners. Here internally with the Cumberland Human Resource Agency on our side of Empower, we have about 35 staff, 20 of which are working directly with families. And when we first were looking for these staff, and all of these positions were new, they were not, it's not like we just rolled them over from one grant to the next. They were specifically hired for this initiative. So we have a very unique group of individuals, some of which have lived experience in poverty and no case management experience. Some of them have case management experience from other funding sources, such as workforce development or Families First. And some of them came from completely different sectors and really wanted to get into the social services field. So we have our own little melting pot per se, which has been really unique and really cool to see, and to get to train them in a way to do things differently through this collaboration has really been cool. And we had to do a little bit of untraining also on things that have been traditionally done for those that came from case management. And even some of the leadership staff had to do some untraining also. A lot of us came from worlds of working with different grants that had a lot of requirements. And there was times that we have even had to sit down and say, hey, we need to unbureaucratize this. Is that a word? That's what we're going to roll with, is unbureaucratize.
Made it up. It's good.
It is an official negative word.
Yep, let's do it.
So, I mean, you could describe this perhaps as a checkboxing. We've talked about it that way. There's a heavy emphasis on compliance in a poverty management system. And the end of the day, you're going to get paid if you were able to deliver services within the compliance of the requirements, right? And keep your mistakes down to minimum. And Mark, you've talked about this over the last couple of years too, that culture of just compliance is so difficult to do an R&D project. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Exactly. We always try and address the symptoms of the problem, but we never tackle the problem. And that's one of the great things about our pilot program, as well as the change of thinking that we've had. It's not just how can we alleviate the pain points that our families are dealing with, but how do we tackle those barriers that really are existing that's holding our families back? Some of those things we can address internally, some of them we can address at the state level, but there's other changes that's going to have to be made at the federal level to really tackle them long term, so we don't have this continual cycle of families being trapped in poverty.
And what's your observation of maybe the top one or two things that the feds should tackle first to make the biggest difference?
The benefits cliff, obviously that's the number one issue. When you look at how all the federal programs are not aligned, they have different qualifications, they have different periods of time when they roll off, and all of them just have that hard stop. It's just like asking somebody who is in addiction just to go cold turkey. That some can do that, but most can't. In our families, we're asking them to go cold turkey off of our assistance programs when they really need to be tapered off. We need to use them as a reward to push families to do better and to constantly be improving, rather than to be a barrier to them doing better.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm wondering if, just a final comment to the audience here, if you were in a different community listening to this, what would you think would be important to start thinking about in terms of setting up a pilot that would really make a difference with how eventually your state and even your relationship with DC would change, so that these system changes might take hold over the next decade?
Well, I was very fortunate, or our agency was very fortunate, in that our leadership really had realized that they needed a change. As I said earlier, this all started during COVID with so much government assistance money coming down. Our employers were saying they couldn't get people to work because they were making too much money and was staying home. So our leadership actually pushed us to do that. In the same time, state had a push as well, so we had great timing. But it's something that the whole community has to buy into. And that's the other thing I'm very proud. It's not just our agency. We are a true collaborative impact group. We have a university, we have a hospital, we have economic development, we have workforce development. Everybody realizes the problem we have, and we've come together collectively to try and figure out how to solve our problems.
Yeah. You also were able to secure the kind of resources that are necessary to put together the infrastructure for the collective impact backbone work that you're doing, to be able to facilitate this collaboration, to be able to reward the partners to work at a whole new level. You have the resources to do that. We've been watching other communities with less resources really struggle creating a different kind of system.
Yeah, obviously, you're not going to get a $25 million grant very often. That is very neat. And if we're correct, it may be one of the largest awards that were ever given in the state of Tennessee. That being said, it comes through a federal funding source, through TANF, Tennessee, or Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. That funding is federal, so it could be done in other states if other communities want to do it. If the state was willing, they certainly could do a pilot project just like what we did, to try and reimagine and modernize the social service programs of today.
Well, I think Tennessee's it's an interesting pioneering work here. You've got 7 pilots that each receive these $25 million grant awards, and then there are more pilots now being put together around the benefits cliff. So if we could start to cultivate that in such a way that the next state might be able to adopt the entire process, customize it for their own purposes, but you've really laid a lot of, I think, powerful, important work in Tennessee. You've laid the groundwork for that others can learn from. Well, thank you so much for this interview, and we look forward to continue seeing all the good results now that all the families have been enrolled into the pilot. It's game on, so it'll be exciting to see the results.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right, cool. Perfect. Let me just
You got it?
record it. Oop. All right, welcome. Oop. Oh, technology.
Great when it works.
It's great when it works, everyone.
The audience understands this is the first time we're using a brand new technological platform that allows us to go live stream in ways that Zoom. We just made a decision that in the long run it's better. But welcome to the first version of this. Okay. And all these videos are available in their full content with all the volume and all the parts of it, with the links that we'll send you. So in this interview, you heard about service gaps and system barriers. This is just a simple, again, probably oversimplified way of thinking about the world, but we notice that there are either a service gap or a system barrier or both that are in people's ways. And one of the things we're starting to measure in the pilot is to what extent does the lack of accessible and affordable childcare influence the ability for people to work? How about transportation? How about housing? So at the micro level, we're trying to understand what families are saying or households are saying is the big barrier or can't get a service that they need. At the macro level, we're trying to aggregate this through, again, that collective impact process of analyzing how often does this particular gap or barrier show up and how acute is it in general. And there's a way to begin, I think, thinking about solving some of these problems at the system level may produce return on investments faster than other gaps and barriers. Obviously, you want to be able to do all the work, but if people have to pick and choose, some of this new research should be able to provide some validation for leaning into one thing or the other. Let's just go to the next slide and talk more specifically about these. So in a system where we are currently managing service gaps and managing system barriers, the poverty alleviation mental model would be all about filling them and eliminating these barriers. So the attention at the macro level has to be on allowing more people to get out of poverty, because you're building more capacity to give them the services that they need, and you're getting all the disincentives out of the system. We make it way too difficult to get out of poverty, way too difficult. And again, our economic mobility rates show that. Next slide. So an example, and these are universal. I have talked now to, I don't know how many, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of groups of people in different communities. These all show up as the same issues. It's different variety, different, balance of challenges, but mostly it's affordable housing, to have affordable housing near jobs, reliable transportation, having affordable and accessible childcare. One of the issues in the Upper Cumberland, and you'll hear about this next, is that our workforce participation rate is lower there because of the lack of accessible childcare. Mental health and substance abuse treatment, healthcare and the insurance, healthcare insurance and emergency assistance funds, all of this, if not provided, if there's not enough of this, it becomes a huge problem in being able to make and work a plan to move from public assistance into the workforce. We can also include in here the available jobs. What do these jobs look like? How much are they paying? What kind of training is available to get to these jobs? How strong is that? How tied are all these training programs to the emerging economy? Over in the barrier world, the benefits cliff, which you heard from Mark, is one of the most obvious problems of a poverty management system. Seriously, if we were to get paid to support people completely out of poverty, we'd have to lose the benefit cliff pretty quickly. It is a awful disincentive to make for people to do what we'd all like people to do: go get a job, start making your own money. Not you need public assistance. For this to be temporary, this benefit cliff needs taken out of the system. And so once this happens, other tumblers are going to fall in terms of making it much more likely that we can support people fully out of public assistance programs and into the work world. Broadband access would be another example. If you don't have it in your community, it's a systemic barrier. There's online applications for employment that are too cumbersome. There are issues around hiring anybody who's had a background with a felony, rigid bureaucracy that doesn't need to be there. It's just additional things that need to be done that make it more difficult to get where you're going. All the cultural differences and system isms, racism, classism, sex, all that stuff that's playing out makes it difficult for some of our population to get where they're going. And then in general, there's just sort of a low poverty IQ that we find with lots of folks in every sector, partly because our institutions are made by people who've had an experience of being raised in middle and upper income worlds. And those are different worlds than if you've been raised in poverty. So one of the things we did to Circles really well, and still do, is we make sure that the people with an experience of poverty are at the planning table. Otherwise, our stuff just misses the mark. And it's one of the things we would have to continue to scale up, is having the influence, experience, expertise, and insights of people experiencing poverty, offering what's going to work and not going to work. Okay. We're about to hear from Rosa. Rosa has been assigned to deal with two major issues right now that are coming out of the Empower Project: accessible childcare and the health insurance, particularly the transitional space that when people leave the Medicaid program in Tennessee called TNCare and have to go into private insurance. She's been doing quite a work around that. The interview that we offer you as a link later has both of those subjects. We're just going to show you right now the childcare subject. So without any further ado, here's Rosa.
Hi, Rosa. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Scott. I'm happy to be here.
So let's start with childcare, and let's start with the assessment that you all did about how much is needed and what you're going to do about it.
Sure. So when assessing the childcare need in the Upper Cumberland area, we identified childcare was a major barrier for working families. So in order to get to the state workforce participation rate of 62%, an additional 7,000 childcare slots was needed in the Upper Cumberland.
So you're trying to get the region to match up to the state level, and the region itself was woefully underneath what the state's level was there. So 7,000 more to get to the workforce state participation rate. So what's happened? How's your work gone so far?
Sure. So that realization led me to walk alongside potential providers to experience their encounters. Formation of focus groups between parents and the Upper Cumberland providers was formed to understand the gaps and barriers of how did we get here? We didn't get here overnight. It took us a while. So what are those gaps and barriers, not only to family, the affordable, the quality, the access, but also to providers to be able to expand. Within that, we had partnership and collaboration with Tennesseans for Quality Early Education, and we started our Bright Start plan in the Upper Cumberland with TQEE.
Okay, and this Bright Star program, what was the result of that?
So within that, we were identifying challenges with children. Why aren't they kindergarten ready? What is it that they're not ready to maintain that third grade math and reading level? So challenges that was identified in childcare in the Upper Cumberland area, we noticed that it's a low margin business model. It has high regulations, high startup costs, and seriously, we're all in a recession with a very staffing crisis.
You know, Rosa, this whole business of getting kids ready for kindergarten, if there was a different business model, David Erickson from the Federal Reserve in New York has been advocating for a whole new financing system that, you know, if we begin to see health and well-being as the same, and we start investing in well-being, for example, kids being ready at kindergarten to learn and develop, we can begin to move a different business model into the mix. Because right now, you don't necessarily think of healthcare insurance companies or hospitals investing in this early childhood work, but they could. And it could have huge impact on the amount of money we're spending downstream on health issues 15, 20, 30 years later, correct?
That's correct. So, you know, Scott, identifying in a child 0 to 5 years old, that brain development. Also, there's 3 cores around that well-being of that child. You got health and development, you got early learning environments, and you got supportive communities. And that all goes together when looking into a child's early education.
So if we rethought how we spend the trillions of dollars we spend on healthcare and public assistance, and to say, look, target this group of kids to make sure that they're ready to learn. They have disadvantages with the zip code they're being raised in. They have disadvantages in the household they're being raised in. They have just a starting place that's different than the kids that are going to thrive because of the ecosystem that they get born into. And so we can level that playing field some. It's another way to get where we want to get to. The other thing that I just wanted to bring up around childcare is that it's more than just daycare, right? We're really talking about combining the need for childcare so adults can work with the need to have children develop and be ready to go and to make it in this wildly changing economy of ours.
Yes, it's that early education, right? And, you know, I'm not even talking about curriculum. Children learn through play. So having all of these 3 cores around that child and developed around that child is going to help the whole areas that they're in.
And if we reframed childcare as a health, one of the social determinants of health that we could invest in, that would have enormous payoffs from government systems, from the private sector, just all of the unbelievable benefits that every sector would enjoy by investing in well-being, then it seems to me that we have less problems with some of the things you've been mentioning that the Bright Star, you know, assessment showed you. You had staffing crises. This doesn't pay enough, right? There's not enough people that want to do childcare because it doesn't pay enough. People don't want to start up childcare centers because of the heavy-duty regulations and the enormous startup costs and the low profit margin. All that are disincentives producing 7,000, you know, lacking childcare slots in your region alone. So it does seem to me like the solution is creating a different business model that makes it attractive to a lot of investors from both government and the private side to want to invest in well-being and outcomes, right? Which include powerful childcare, early childhood development blended together. Is that a fair assumption?
Absolutely. Definitely our goal in the Upper Cumberland area with our Bright Start plan. So bringing that awareness to the top so that everybody understands the impact of our children.
So you've been a part of helping to introduce a couple of bills. Do you want to just describe the House bill studied by the Tennessee, Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, TASR group?
The TASR group, absolutely. So spring of 2024, a House bill mandating a study by the TASR group. You're talking about the Tennessee Advisory Commissions for Intergovernmental Relations. And it was around rules, regulations that impact the startup, operation, and the expansion of childcare businesses. So that was introduced in March of 2024. We worked closely with TASR on the gaps and barriers we found within the Upper Cumberland area. And they went on to research the other state to verify if the same gaps and barriers in the Upper Cumberland was being in the other states as well. So we worked closely with them, and they actually had to have a final recommendation report December of 2024 that they provided to legislation of recommendations on childcare.
Yeah, so good work. And again, without your role, Rosa, all this stuff is just a great idea that doesn't go anywhere. So thank you for your work. You're really good at it. And I always learn something in talking to you. So
thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you.
And the analysis of a barrier, we think all these points need to be touched on. So I'll just briefly fly over this. But again, these are very complicated, sophisticated conversations that need to be had across sectors to get some relief from the issues that are keeping poverty at status quo levels. First of all, to understand, as I mentioned, what's the scope of the impact? How many people are we talking about have problems with affordable housing or reliable transportation or can't access mental health and want it? Mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment. What are the current workarounds that we're noticing people do? I mean, can they solve these problems on their own? Is there another way to do childcare that they're figuring out? And is that what we should assume is the way to go? Or do we really need to be intentional about this in the design, the architecture of these programs? What is scalable? What are we learning here that we think ought to be scaled up? It's a pilot. And mostly across the country, we have pilots. So what are the scalable solutions that start to move the needle on reducing poverty rates? When we're looking at our collaboration, we're asking the question all the time, which of these organizations has the interest and ability to scale up a solution? If we came up with a new way to deal with a lot of new reliable transportation solutions, who could handle it? Who wants to handle it? That has to be identified in any community. There are cost considerations. What are their financial requirements for implementing this at the next level? And how's that going to get paid for? I mentioned David Erickson's book. I'll just do a plug right now. But what I like about The Fifth Freedom by David Erickson is that he's taking the incredible complex world of social and public policy, economic policy, and he's boiled down an understanding of it in a fairly short read that will expose the reader to lots of things that are working and happening right now, and why we should be hopeful about this coming together almost in a natural evolutionary pathway now to begin moving the needle on poverty. Having read it carefully, I'm encouraged by it. I feel, okay, there's more out there than I knew, and I'm in this field. So I would encourage you to read that or other work done by David and his colleagues at the Federal Reserve Bank. The return on investment can start to be understood. I think as we get more sophisticated, we're going to start looking at how does money saved get reinvested into solutions that work. And we'll all get more sophisticated about this over time. I'm sure of that. So anyhow, that's a flyover of what we would consider important when looking at these barriers. Okay, this next conversation is with Keith Barnes. He's privately funded with the Martha O'Brien Center in Nashville. Keith has been assigned to a project called Beyond the Cliff, which is a national coalition. Some of our Circles USA colleagues and chapters are a part of all that, among many other players. they're looking to better understand what are going to be the solutions for the benefit cliff, which again is one of the most frustrating phenomenons of what I would just again refer to as this poverty management system. It produces this as a side effect, and it makes it really hard to help people get where they're going. Okay, let's listen to Keith.
Keith, welcome to the webinar. It's great to have you here, and we're going to talk today about the impact of the cliff effect. You're working with lots of families. We're working with lots of families in the Upper Cumberland pilot where we're consulting, and these families are now encountering the benefits cliff in a variety of different ways. And your coalition is designed to start giving some relief to that by, I think, as I understand it, providing some local workarounds while state and federal policies change this. So let's just talk about what you're seeing with the families right now that stands out for you. In particular, I mean, we're seeing healthcare, Medicaid, we're seeing childcare subsidies, housing vouchers, TANF, all of it. So what's been your observations?
Absolutely. Well, first, Scott, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this important topic as part of this webinar. So just for a little bit of context, I lead our nationally focused coalition to, as you mentioned, address the benefits cliff. And that really was born out of what started at Martha O'Brien Center several years ago now, a recognition of the benefits cliff, of this sort of one step forward, two steps back as caregivers, as parents increase. You know, we were helping them start on what was supposed to be a career pathway, and instead we're you know, encountering these losses and benefits, all the ones you mentioned, right? That it just, the math wasn't working, and so rather than, you know, being able to continue to progress in these careers and get ahead, they were frankly, it was a poverty trap. You know, yeah. They were being forced to make these impossible choices.
You sent me some articles earlier today. The New England states tackle benefits cliff, which we'll send links to. That explains what some of the New England states are doing in a coalition through Region 1 of HHS. And then we've got the U.S. Chamber Foundation publishing a big piece. And back in the day when I was running circles, we were in conversation with the Florida Chamber of Commerce, which said that they got the biggest response from their membership to the benefit cliff work they were doing over everything else they'd ever done before. So there was this burgeoning awareness that, oh my gosh, you know, we need to qualify people who are unqualified because of policy. It's not, so when you look at all the struggles that the businesses have right now, getting people into entry-level positions and keeping them in those positions, most employers are sort of amazed at the benefit cliff, and they don't get it until they, you know, understand, oh, they're not going to take the raise, they're not going to take the extra hours, they may not even take the job. If we offer health insurance, we may actually undermine their ability to have good health insurance now because it's tough to replace Medicaid. So all of these awarenesses are happening, and yet, you know, we identified the cliff effect back in circles almost 12 years ago and built our first, you know, lodestone of a calculator off an Excel spreadsheet with a brilliant volunteer out of Pennsylvania, which then, you know, we sent off to the feds in Atlanta and over to New York and LEAP, and all these groups started making it more sophisticated, which was great. But it's a workaround, right? The calculator is, this is a bad situation, and here's how to navigate it as best as you can. So what do you see in terms of the future for Tennessee? And I know you're in the early stages of building out this agenda, but what should the audience start getting to know that their state might be able to do, or what the feds should be doing differently? What do you think?
Absolutely, and you're exactly right. I mean, you know, our hope with our pilot is that it's a demonstration point for what a better system could look like. There is a lot of opportunity and necessity to address this at the state level, but particularly at the federal level. So I do want to just kind of put a very distinct marker that this is fundamentally a federal problem. Like these are programs that are, you know, authorized by Congress, and ultimately that is kind of how we're going to address this is through sound evidence-based policymaking. And I would say within that, there is a road similar to the leadership Tennessee is already displaying nationally, right? Around we need to test and innovate and evaluate what is working to help families move forward. How do we not just on the benefits cliff, but economic mobility in general. So I think that's where Tennessee really is kind of leading on this in the near term, the first step. And that's what we need in the near term for Congress to focus on more. I would say, zooming back down to the state level, obviously we're partway through these pilots. I know the state funded a separate sort of post-secondary focused pilot. So I think it's going to be really important to let those, play out and take those lessons learned. We were talking before, I think, that's the beauty of this pilot initiative is, we all came with sort of our best ideas, and there was sort of this review process to further sort of refine. So now we're testing it in the real world. And so my hope is that from that, we identify some very clear, Tennessee sound proposals. I would say sort of zooming out a little more generically, there are the reports that we'll share out. There's a lot of levers that states can pull. Like there are trade-offs. Like I'm not gonna pretend like there aren't, increasing eligibility limits in some programs like child care subsidies for some states could translate to wait lists. Like there's no easy answers here. But I think the first step is to look at the evidence, to really look at this from the perspective of families that are navigating the system, and figuring out what works best for them. Yeah.
In the report, Keith, by the National Conference of State Legislators, they put the solutions into 3 categories. They said one category is a very whole family-based approach. In other words, you're really taking a look at what the family needs at this point in time to get economically stable. And then the second thing that they're talking about is just clear pathways to jobs that are better supported through the whole process. So when you take a look at the 5 stages that most families have to go through, they have to get through the crisis that's happening right now, get stabilized, get prepared for the workforce, get placed, and then advance. Those 5 stages are often done by different groups with different people that may or may not know what happened beforehand. So in the work in Upper Cumberland, we've got navigators that support people through all 5 stages, and the handoffs are all coordinated with our collaborative partners. The third thing is the exit ramps themselves and the entrance ramp need to be smoother. So what you're doing, it seems to me, is providing a pilot that does incorporate all 3 of these identified strategies by the conference. And it seems to me that the feds need to set up a situation that puts more design power into the states, and the states need to allow a co-design process to happen with communities based on best practices like what you're building out, correct?
I think that's a promising approach. And I would echo, so as we built our national coalition of practitioners and we've sort of compared notes, that's exactly right, like what you described, right? Like we need this more person-centered approach, including that coaching, right? So it's about making connections and those warm handoffs. It's about tracking to goals, not just sort of, frankly, the system we built is around compliance, and compliance does not translate to human flourishing, full stop.
So Keith, I think just to summarize here, we're really talking about common sense. It's being able to assess where the family's at right now with all the dynamics, to look at a plan that makes sense to them, and then support them to make that plan happen. And so congrats on having this pilot up and running on the National Coalition, and look forward to seeing what comes out of all of this. Welcome to the...
So just a summary here. When it comes to building a different system, a poverty alleviation system that's accountable to reducing poverty rates, it's going to be accountable to also not just manage service gaps, not just manage system barriers, but to fill these gaps and eliminate these barriers. That's what's going to begin to get traction to start getting poverty rates to come down. I want to show again the, let's go to the next slide, Becky.
Yeah.
The innovation that's happening across the country, not only in the Tennessee pilots, but in many other places, involves understanding the entire process, from the time we meet people that might be in a crisis to stabilizing them with perhaps public assistance, counseling, whatever other kind of supports they're needing, getting them ready for the workforce in careers that have a line of sight to more income. So they get placed into something that begins to move them towards an advancement opportunity that begins to produce enough income to support their families. This is what's going to make the economy stronger. This is what makes our investments in all the downstream stuff we're dealing with right now start to have better results, because we're going to be able to invest more upstream to get this coordinated at a whole new level. Next slide. These work pathways, they have to have a number of ingredients for it to work. There has to be some combination of helping people with hard and soft skills. The credentials and certification requirements need to be sorted out in terms of what do I need to be certified, but what also is going to be something that's a serious career option that's going to have the potential of advancing me to an income level. What are the key values of the employers I'm going to be working with, so I don't find myself going against those values and getting fired? What are the non-negotiables to stay employed? All of that needs to be understood very well by people that may or may not have a lot of work experience. The income line of sight has got to be very strong. People need to see that if I start here, I go to here. And that can be done better by employers and by workforce development specialists and by navigators and anybody else that's supporting this new employee in entry-level positions, to show how, if you do this, this, and this, things start to get better. Of course, the cliff effect needs mitigated. People need to understand what are the employee support programs that I might be able to utilize. And in general, everyone's poverty IQ, I just keep saying, we need to understand what is particular to people that have had the experience of poverty. It's a trauma-inducing experience. What does this mean to an employer who wants to recruit, retain, and advance people who have had an experience in poverty? Because that's who they're going to be recruiting now. Okay, next. So this is a conversation with Kathy Reynolds, the Director of Economic Mobility at United Way in Greater Knoxville. Also, United Way is a recipient of one of these Tennessee Opportunity Pilot Initiatives, and she'll be talking about what they're doing. And I particularly was interested in Upper Cumberland, for example, where we're beginning to understand how to build relationships with preferred employers that have everything I just mentioned. In some cases, even certifying employers with information about the experience of poverty and how it affects employees. And Kaki is experimenting also with models around this. And so let's just listen to her talk about how they're putting together these work pathways.
Kaki, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So we wanted to learn from you, your work and your pilot around the Alice at Work program. Can you tell us about what that does and what you're learning from it?
Yeah, so we've just started, we had our first cohort in the fall. We've got another one gearing up just here in a couple of weeks. Alice at Work is spearheaded by our partners at United Way of Northern New Jersey. They're the ones that really hold all of the Alice research and Alice data. Alice stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed, and it really is a movement to help anybody understand the experience of those kind of middle wage earners. So those that are between the federal poverty level and perhaps a thriving wage. We see specifically in our area, 40% of our Knox County residents are below the Alice threshold. And so our work through our pilot project works with those individuals. But as we've navigated this project, it became really clear that we've got to also help our employers understand the Alice experience and how this might be showing up in their workforce. And so Alice at Work is a curriculum that we've partnered in implementing with the United Way of Northern New Jersey. Businesses get a unique data report that shows how Alice is represented within their workforce. So the demographics, the percentages, so that they can really understand like how much of my workforce would be considered Alice. And then that is followed with a 6-module curriculum. It's a cohort-based module or kind of group. So 4 to 6 businesses are going through it at the same time. Various topics include benefits and compensation, scheduling and flexibility, professional development, financial wellness, and really thinking about, from an employer standpoint, what can they do to better support their Alice staff. And some of it's as simple as considering, what is your shift schedule like, and does it line up with the public transportation that Alice might use to get to your work site? Or are there maybe financial wellness activities that you could partner with a local nonprofit for your workforce to better understand financial literacy and things of that nature? So like I said, we've done just one so far. We've got one coming up and are already slotting some folks for a summer cohort as well.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you. And we've got a link so people can find out more about that if they want to bring it into their community. Let's talk about your mobility mentors. These are professionals that you've hired with this pilot funding to work with families in both making and working their plans. So tell us more about how you structured that.
Yeah, so we have 21 mobility mentors that are housed across 9 of our partner organizations. So through our pilot, the United Way is the backbone organization, but we're partnering with local nonprofits that have trusted relationships and longstanding trust within our community where our mentors work. And those
trust between potential participants and the organization itself, right?
Correct. Yeah. So some of our partner organizations are like the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, Centro Hispano, which is kind of a Latino serving organization in our community. And these are nonprofits that have been in existence and serving community for a long time. And so when we got this opportunity, we knew at the United Way, like, we're not a client-facing organization, and to be able to really make an impact, we needed to make sure our partners were at the table that could really relate to and be in relationship with those that we were trying to serve. And so we adopted a model out of Boston called Economic Mobility Pathways, which is empath for short. And it really rests in the idea that the experience of living in poverty is a chronic trauma. And through relationship and safe relationship and trust and trauma-informed responses, our mentors are able to help participants kind of break out of that scarcity mindset and see a path forward for themselves to be able to thrive. And so we use the Bridge to Self-Sufficiency, which is a part of empath that breaks down the experience of poverty into several different pillars where participants can identify where they are and on the continuum where they'd like to be in each of those pillars to achieve self-sufficiency. And then our mentors help them set SMART goals, short, very measurable, actionable goals to help them kind of tick away at wherever it is that they want to go and what it is that they want to accomplish.
Great. One of the things that I know you're also looking at is how to financially incentivize. As we know, this poverty management system has significant financial disincentives that the benefit cliff provides. So you can make more money, but it's not, working doesn't add value. It just, you actually lose spending power by taking these opportunities we want everyone to take. So you've been able to use financial incentives. And for all the pilots, I'm sure it's a huge question mark about where to put the investment so you get the biggest impact out of that incentive. What are you learning right now about all this?
Yeah, so we use our assistance in a handful of different ways. Families are able to access supportive dollars that are going to really move them up on that bridge to self-sufficiency. We have some emergency dollars that kind of prevent that backfall. Let's say they get a flat tire, or it snowed and work was closed and they can't pay rent, things like that. Apart from that, the empath model utilizes goal action payments. So each of those SMART goals that families establish come with an established payment at the end of them. And they're not huge, $25 to $100 based on how intricate and deep that goal, how long it might take to accomplish. But what we find is that even those smaller payments really build the momentum and allow participants to have a little bit of a celebration when they've accomplished even something seemingly small. And it really kind of builds that trajectory for participants. Additionally, we, as part of our research component of our project, have larger cash payments for milestone accomplishments. So let's say a participant moves out of subsidized housing into a market rental property, they're able to get $750 cash that is really theirs to use. And it builds our ability and our mentors' ability, like it gives them a little bit of cushion to also consider saving and looking forward to, okay, I got this raise, I lost my subsidized housing, I got this milestone payment, my subsidy is gone, how can I kind of acclimate to this new budget that I'm working with? Additionally, we have transitional benefits, which are really, they're accessible to all of our participants as they lose those subsidies, whether it's SNAP or childcare or housing subsidies. We're able to plug that gap for a couple of months, again, while the mentor and the participant really plan and figure out how do we adjust our budget and our lifestyle, right, based on this new normal of, with a decreased subsidy or whatnot.
It seems to me, Kathy, that once, our groups commit to getting people really economically stable, where they say that they've got enough money to pay their expenses, they have enough money to put into the bank for the future, it pulls up all these issues that we're talking about, right, that have to be somehow. The solution lies in being able to embed into federal and state policy the kind of changes that allow everyone to do the work you're doing.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like that kind of investment is what you're informing right now. Like what, and you and the other pilots in Tennessee are really bringing, I think, some clarity to the table about if we're really going to get this to work, we may need to front load resources here, but the payoff is that we don't have to keep putting those resources over and over and over again into families, that things start to work.
Yeah, for sure.
Boost it into a new income level, and that can't be hampered by structural disincentives.
Yeah, and I think that we're all, the shared learning across all of the pilots is something that's really exciting. There was a long period of ramp up and figuring out how to do this. And now in our third year of programming, I think we're all getting a better grasp on what's working, right? And recognizing that it's a pilot and not every aspect of all of our programs is the most impactful. But I think between the 7 pilots, we feel pretty confident that we could probably piece something together that makes a whole lot of sense and is scalable in a lot of different communities. And one of the cool things also is that the way that the state has supported this project and doing it in different places in different ways across the state really supports a community-driven initiative, right? That what works in Knox County or East Tennessee might look different than what is the most impactful in West Tennessee or Middle Tennessee. And we're even finding, we serve 10 counties, that the things that we're investing in for participants across rural versus urban counties is drastically different. And so there's a lot of learning happening. I think there's a lot more to be done, and we're excited to be a part of it and be a part of a pilot initiative, all of the grantees really working together to find solutions that work across multiple communities.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kathy. This has been fantastic. And it's exciting to see what you're going to be learning next year, and pulling it all together as a gift from Tennessee to the rest of the country is what I hope happens next.
Same. We hope that is the future for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's summarize, and then we're going to take some questions. So any effort right now will have to answer these questions at the economic stability level in terms of making and working a plan. Everyone begins to have to understand, how much money do I really need? How am I going to earn it? What soft skills and credentials will I need to get this money? What am I going to do about the cliff effect? And what support will I need, both formally and informally, so that I can work this plan until I get where I'm going? Next slide. We've talked about this need for social capital in order to both make and work plans. We have found in circles over really several decades now that bridging, bonding, and linking, when all of that social capital is at play, people move where they're going a lot faster. It takes a lot longer if people are trying to do it in isolation, or if it's just simply with a professional that's in a 9-to-5 position and checking in from time to time. So it's really important to start understanding the power of social capital. Plus, it tends to educate a larger swath of the population to be friendly to what needs to really happen to reduce poverty in their communities. The poverty alleviation systems that we're promoting all have these components. There's economic stability teams that are accountable to making progress with households out of poverty. They're also required. They're pooling together to provide service gap and system barrier information into a collective impact team that has the capacity to analyze that data and make sense of it and start recommending new policies, new investments, redirecting of money, et cetera, to a leadership team that is across sectors and has the wherewithal to make new investments in different ways to get better results. Next slide. When measuring poverty alleviation, it's going to be important that these goals are based on individual household budgets. Helping people reduce expense is just as powerful as helping them to increase income. And so we're looking for balanced budgets for people to be able to pay their basic bills and have some left over for the future. Next slide. These metrics are important right now, and they're more available to be able to use. They're, I think, a good next step for all of us to think about the ALICE self-sufficiency rates, or in many cases 225 at the federal poverty level, or self-sufficiency markers that are baked into other systems like Empath out of Boston. Next. When we are looking, we have tried to launch the beginnings of a poverty alleviation system in a number of communities before we got to Tennessee. And one of the things we notice is we really need leadership to have bandwidth. We can't, I mean, as much as a school superintendent, for example, may want to have this happen, are they in a position to be able to do the amount of work it takes to get a shared vision across partnerships? Can they find the talent that they need to manage so that they can lead? And can we develop more leadership? We are more and more getting savvy to the idea that we have to have the right kind of leadership that can pull this off. Secondly, there has to be resources to do this work. It can't be done on a small budget. It really needs to be done in a way that can build these very sophisticated partnerships that need to occur now. And there has to be some collective impact capacity. If you Google that, you'll find out more about it. What are the features and functions of a collective impact? But we are looking hard at all of that before we get involved with anybody, because we're looking at initial conditions that we think can work for the kind of pilot work that we're interested in supporting right now. Next slide. We are going to be holding a summit out in Cookeville, Tennessee on May 13th from 1 to 5 at the Upper Cumberland Development District. Please attend, fly out, meet people that are doing this work in Tennessee. It's a wonderful place to visit. There's a lot of powerful stuff happening. We'd love to see you out there. So feel free to sign up through our website, thepovertysolution.com/summit. And now let's take a look at these frequently asked questions that we get. And I already laid out to you what I think the main requirements are for a pilot are going to be leadership, resources, and some capacity to do collective impact work. Two, the process for building an assessment or a poverty alleviation system is 4 stages for us. There's the assessment, which the deliverable is a plan to do a planning grant. And then that can be used to get resources for the planning process. Then that deliverable is a pilot plan. And then it also is a way to develop proposals for the pilot funding. And then once the pilot starts to move down the road, the question becomes how to sustain and expand it, which is the 4th stage of this work. The policy changes that would make the most difference in reducing poverty rates would be to start moving funding towards the outcome of reducing poverty rates and the outcome of supporting families completely out of poverty. This is the biggest shift that I would recommend be made. And to have other players from other sectors invest more fully in this kind of work, because the benefits of reducing poverty are available to all the sectors, not just human services, not just workforce, not just employers trying to hire entry-level workers. It really crosses the gamut. So let's take some questions if there are some, and we'll wrap up.
Let me just take a look at the chat here. Doesn't look like we have any questions, so covered everything, looks like, Scott.
Good. So that was that clear, huh? Great.
Perfect.
And people can reach out to us and we can answer more questions in person. A lot of people would prefer to have a more customized conversation, which is fine by us. So thank you for your time. We look forward to perhaps seeing you out in Cookeville in May, and best of luck to the work you're doing as well.
Yes, and as a friendly reminder to everybody, we will be sending out these slides and also an exclusive download. So anybody who registered for this webinar, we will absolutely send it to your email. But if you did not register and you would like these resources, you can either put your email in the comments or send us an email at info@thepovertysolution.com, and we'll have all these resources sent over to you. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.